Welcome to Inside the GMAT, the official podcast of GMAC. I'm your host, Zach. When most people think about business school, they think about case studies, strategy, career advancement, that kind of stuff. But today's guest, I think, is going to challenge us to think about something a little bit deeper. What does it really mean to build a career that does good, not one that just looks good? My guest is Spencer Anderson, head of operations at Leland Coaching, one of the fastest growing coaching platforms helping learners and professionals reach their business school goals. Before joining Leland, Spencer earned his MBA from Harvard Business School, where he affirmed his belief that good business done well can genuinely change lives. Today, I'm excited to hear Spencer's journey from the HBS classroom to a mission-driven startup, how coaching became his lens for helping people flourish, and what all of us can learn about aligning success with purpose. Spencer, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Zach. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad to have you on the show, obviously for all the reasons that I just mentioned in the introduction, but I think so many of our listeners will be able to see themselves in some way in your story. I mean, you've gone through what our listeners are going through right now.
Yeah, well, and I've made a lot of mistakes too. And so if anybody listening has ever made any mistakes in their lives, then hopefully some of those experiences will resonate. But yeah, I think I've also been able to find some things that have made my life and career a lot more meaningful. And so hopefully some of the things we chat about will be helpful.
We've met briefly, but can you share a bit about your background and sort of what first drew you to a business career or getting a business degree?
Yeah, so I grew up in Utah, pretty religious family, and kind of wanted to go do good in the world, and I thought the way you go do good is you go be a doctor. So I was originally pre-med in college at BYU and thought that's the way I'm going to go save the world, like is go fix people's bodies, which is an amazing profession. My brother's a doctor, and I took an economics class because I was like, oh, maybe I could do some business in addition to my doctoring. And in my first economics 101, it was a brutal class. It was awful and terrible and difficult. And halfway through, I was like, this is amazing. And this is what I want to do, just because it changed the way that I thought about the world and incentives and people. And it was really difficult for me. I had a really hard time. It was my worst performing class. But it really forced me to work on something and change my mindset, which I found really valuable. And so that kind of started my transition to thinking more about business generally. And yes, I do want to go make a difference in the world, as cliche as that sounds. But I did want to say, hey, I want my life to mean something and be valuable to other people. And I felt like business was a way I could do that on a bigger scale, go try to attack really, big problems that people or companies or organizations or governments are having, and how can I kind of be involved in those processes to try to help fix those things.
Doing good can take on so many different forms, right? It's not just being a doctor, though doctors do a lot of good. My background's in theater. I think art does a lot of good too. And it might not be the same sort of healing that a doctor does, but there is something healing about that. So I do believe that in whatever you do, if you approach it with sort of the right mindset, that you can do good no matter what. And that's something that I really resonated with you when we first met. So going from that experience at BYU, you eventually got to HBS. What was that journey like?
Yeah, it was not smooth. I wasn't necessarily planning on an MBA when I first started out, and I ended up getting a job at Bain Company out of undergrad. That also was not necessarily my plan, was to go into consulting, but yeah, I ended up having some great things happen there and was able to go work there. I was there for almost 7 years, and so a lot of my colleagues were going into business school, and that's when I really started considering, is this something I want to do? And I actually didn't get in the first time I applied, so I applied to Harvard and Stanford on a little bit of a whim, and just thought, oh yeah, sure, I'd go to one of these, and didn't even get an interview at either one. And so I was like, I'm amazing. Like I should get in, and I didn't. And so it was a nice, humbling experience to really think about, well, why get an MBA at all, right? Like, is this actually going to be useful, and what is it going to do for me? And so I really spent that next year, as I ended up continuing in consulting and doing some fun things there. But I really kind of took that year to think about what can this degree do for me? How can it make a difference in my life and in what I'm trying to do? And I think for a variety of different reasons, but I think like being able to go into the gym of a business school and go do 500 cases, 500 bench presses of cases where you're putting yourself in the shoes of interesting individuals that were facing really tough problems, and being able to think about, okay, how do I break down those problems and think about the trade-offs. I'd say on this kind of point of doing good, I think Clayton Christensen, maybe he was an incredible professor at HBS and built arguably the most popular class at HBS on strategy in folks' second year. And he wrote a book about how will you measure your life. And I think that book has made a really big impact on my life. I think coming out of undergrad and getting into Bain, and you see, oh, the next step, and I could make this much money, and I can, like climb this ladder, and that'll help me get into this opportunity. And I think it's so, I was in that, and maybe there's still maybe elements of me that are still in that for sure. But I think like reading that book and being a part of some of those classes where you can really take the step back and evaluate what matters in my life and what do I actually want to accomplish and what is meaningful. And I think that was a really powerful experience. And I think HBS and these business schools have an amazing ability to pull in people who can help you think about those questions in your own life. I got to interview Mitt Romney in front of my class, which was really amazing. We had the Dalai Lama come to one of our classes on kind of leadership and happiness, and we had other kind of great figures in the world and business. And that was a really cool opportunity opportunities that you'd never have anywhere else.
I think that the ability to step back and observe or experience other people, learn from other people, when they say that going to business school or getting your MBA is learning how to be a leader, I think that, in my opinion, being able to listen to others and learn from others is probably really what it means to be a leader, or at least the beginning of learning how to be a leader. Do you feel like those experiences helped you develop leadership skills?
100%. I think, a great leader creates movement in an organization or a group of people, right? And how do you create that movement? Well, you need to understand who you're leading and say, well, okay, what's important to you? What are we trying to do here? And so I do think that there's absolutely an element of listening, understanding, knowing yourself, and then creating that vision of, okay, where do we want to move to, and then how do we lead and get people to kind of go in that direction. And I think like being able to think about me as a leader and what kind of leader do I want to be? What is my style going to look like? Being able to see that across a lot of other great business and world leaders was really valuable to me. I remember a conversation I had with one of my classmates as I was walking back from school one day, and we had just had a case on leadership and integrity, and would you fib a little bit if it meant, hey, your business is going to be able to do XYZ, and we started talking about, well, let's give some extremes. If you could be an honest janitor that leads in a very, very small way, but you're honest and you've got values and that's kind of your life, or slightly less honest but a powerful business tycoon and a great leader, like what would you rather be? And would you be willing to make that trade-off to say, well, I'm going to sacrifice some of my values to be able to achieve greatness, maybe however people define what greatness is. And I remember my classmate was like, oh, I'd probably pick the latter. And I was like, man, is that what I want? And I think for me, like, I was like, I'd rather be the janitor. And it was like this weird moment, but it was like, what do I value in life? Do I value getting stuff? And some people might say, well, Spencer, when you're in that position, you're going to be able to have this influence on other people, right? And then you can kind of do good. And that just, to me, feels wrong. Like, I'm not going to go sacrifice my values temporarily for this, and then I can go switch back and say, no, now I'm a good leader and now I'm a good person. And here's, now I can kind of have that influence. I just don't buy that. I don't think that's the right way to live a life. And I think that the janitor, and I was a janitor in high school, by the way. So I can say this, like, I was like taking side jobs. I had a paper route, I had a janitor job when I was younger. And so but I think like that, like, doing your job, whatever your job is, doing that with integrity and staying true to your values, I think you'll look back on your life and feel like a lot more fulfilled and meaningful than if you sacrifice those things.
After you graduated from HBS, did you join Leland right away?
I went back to Bain right after HBS and was there for another 2.5, almost 3 years. And yeah, really enjoyed Bain, but then just barely left last year to join Leland, this little coaching startup in Utah.
Why? What inspired you?
Yeah, I think if I were optimizing for money and especially less risky money, I probably would have made some different choices. But I think I always and I think, to be clear, I think, we'll chat about this a little bit later, but I think like I want to make sure that there are people who are in deep poverty, and like, being able to get a little bit more money really makes a massive difference on their life. And I don't want to disregard that, because I think, I've spent time in deep rural parts of America. I've spent time in African villages, and kind of seeing some of that poverty. And I think, for a lot of those people, being able to make a little bit more money actually does make an incredible difference on their life and their well-being. And so I don't want to disregard that, and make sure that that's kind of included here. I think probably for a lot of the listeners here, if you're kind of in the position to be able to go get an MBA, you're maybe not thinking about, am I going to be able to get a meal, tonight, or am I going to be able to kind of get clothes for my kids? But I think for people who are, in this position, if you're only optimizing for money, I think you're going to get to the end of your life and regret it. I wrote a paper on regret while I was in business school, and did some research on what people regret the most. And a lot of times people regret not pursuing money at the expense of taking other chances, taking other opportunities, taking other business ideas. And it was big numbers. 70-80% of people have deep regrets about that at the end of their
Wow.
life. And I think that it's so easy to pursue those things, right? And so I think for me, this decision about, hey, I'm on this partner track at Bain. I can go make, a few $1,000,000 a year as a partner. And what an amazing, opportunity that could be. There's trade-offs there. There's really heavy trade-offs where you're giving up a lot of your time and family time and other things in your life. But there's amazing trade-offs there too. And I've got great friends who have done that and are doing that. And, and we all optimize for different things. I think for me, I did really want to go build something. I felt like it would be amazing to go build a company, from very early stages. And I really loved the coaching space. I had been involved in coaching a lot at Bain and in business school, and just kind of helping somebody, discover, oh, this is how I can get this, here's how I can accomplish my goal. And being able to be a part of that, I think, was really compelling for me. And so to find Leland, I had some friends in the venture capital space, and they said, Spencer, if you're exploring other opportunities outside of Bain, you should really consider this. And they knew that they knew I loved coaching. They knew I loved startups, and they told me about Leland and how it was this amazing intersection of trying to democratize this expertise and give coaching and help and resources to people trying to pursue their goals. And was a startup pretty early in the startup process, and it just felt like an amazing opportunity for me to go build. And yeah, hopefully there are some asymmetric returns. We're all motivated by money to a degree too. I want to
Sure,
make
of
sure that I can
course.
provide for my family and everything else. And so I'm hopeful that'll be there. But I think, those were the trade-offs that I wanted to make, is go build something that I felt like really had a meaningful impact on the world.
Absolutely. And I'm guessing you probably had at least one really impactful coach in your life.
Certainly multiple. I look back at not just coaches, but mentors and examples of people in my family or community or others. And I think, especially a couple of the early people that helped me in the Bain process, recruiting for consulting. One person in particular who really helped me with my MBA applications the second time around. Yeah, made a really strong impact on that for me.
For you, is coaching about paying it forward? Is it that you love to be in that sort of, relationship dynamic? You love teaching? I mean, or is it everything?
Great question. And I think some of this comes back to my worldview about what's the purpose of life. And I think one of my maxims is that life is a gym, not a spa, and that we are here to grow and become something better. I think that's one of the incredible things about humans, is our ability to grow and become something better, achieve a new skill or develop a new relationship with someone and connect in some way and progress. And I think that that's really powerful. And so it's great when we have a good time. The spa is nice. My wife needs to remind me that, like, Spencer, it's not all about, like, terrible experiences that make you grow. We should also enjoy the things that are beautiful about life. But I think if that's what you're looking for out of life, that it's going to be this spa-like experience, you'll have a rude awakening if you haven't already. And so I think if we can treat the life experiences that we have as, how can I grow from this? How can I become better? How can I help somebody else? How can I connect better with somebody because of this terrible thing that happened to me? And I think coaching is kind of a huge part of that. How do you change the perspectives or use tools or resources to be able to do that in your life, to be able to leverage those things? And I think some of those early experiences in my life, I think when I got my first job at Bain, going back to recruit at BYU the next year, suddenly I'm a very popular little fish in this tiny pond of the university, but you've got all these people who are desperate to get these kind of jobs and are very excited about them, and being able to chat with them and say, hey, here's the dance you need to learn. You seem like a great person, you're smart, you're hardworking, whatever. Here's the process that is the gap, right? To be able to actually accomplish the goal that you want, and to be able to be a part of that process, I think is very motivating and just gives me a lot of energy.
What does it mean to coach somebody on MBA admissions? What does that coaching look like in practice? How do you help somebody during this pretty fraught sometimes experience of applying to business school?
Yeah, business school is a tricky dance in and of itself, right? And you've got to learn the moves, or you're going to kind of be dancing out of rhythm. And that was me the first time I went through this process. And I think what a lot of people, myself included, the first time I went through this process, and a lot of people, when they're going through it, they're thinking, ooh, the main question I need to answer here is, what does the school want? And how do I show that I am what they want? And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think, and I think coaching can help with this, but I think the way to approach it is, this is what I want to go do with my life. Hey, you business schools out there, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm going to go do, whether I'm a part of your business school or not. This is how I'm going to go make a difference in the world. And then you see which business schools pick you up. And you say, hey, if I'm the fit for what this program is, and here's why I think I am, here's what I like about the program, and here, and you kind of, you make sure that you include that in there. But I think you really need to switch the script and say, this is who I am, and this is what I want to go do. And it would be great to be a part of this, this little gym of business school, whether that's HBS or Stanford or wherever you go. And that takes a lot of mindset shifts, because I've coached people on this, and myself included. We slip back into, well, what do they want? And no, what are you gonna go do? And you need to be okay with the school saying, oh, you're not what I'm looking for. And that's actually good for both worlds. You don't want to be at a place where you kind of faked it to get in, and now it's not a good match for both sides. But as I've talked to a lot of admissions directors at current programs, and former admissions directors, all of them tell me, hey, Spencer, what we're looking for is this interesting, robust class of people who, they may not have figured out their entire life, right? Like, nobody really knows when you're in your mid-20s or early 30s or whatever, like what you're going to actually go do 50 years from now. But at least having the kind of vision of what brings them energy, and what are they excited about, and what's the direction they want to go to make a difference in the world. And so they're trying to create a class of individuals that are going to mesh really well in the classroom and on campus, and are going to go make a difference in the world, and that they can kind of fuel that process, and that the business school is more of a catalyst and a adding fuel to the fire, versus the end all be all. Oh, once I get into that school, I've made it. No, that's, it's like, no, you got to go live your life after. And well, what are you going to go do after that? Right. And so I think being able to coach people on that, and help them kind of catch that vision, and position themselves and their stories and what they really want to do. It's a tough process. It's vulnerable. People cry, and as they're working through their essays and whatever else, it's a very, I go back and look at my first ones, and I cringe. They're awful. And I go back at the second ones, and I'm like, okay, they're a little less cringy. They're still like, it's like uncomfortable for me to read, because I'm like, oh, this sounds maybe a little cliche or whatever. But when people read it, they're like, that's you, Spencer, and that's actually what you love, and that's actually what you want to do. And that's the power of a great essay, and a great application.
So how does Leland's model specifically, in your opinion, sort of help people understand who they are, help them discover what their goals are?
Yeah, I mean, our process is personal, right? I think that's one of our business models. This doesn't have to be an entire Leland pitch, but I think our business model is about people. And we believe that there's expertise in a lot of different people. And we have AI tooling, and we have, other things like that. But our model is human to human interaction. And so, yes, our goal is to help you get into business school or get a job. We've got coaches across a lot of different career platforms as well, career industries as well. And so we do want to help you actually achieve your goal. And the process kind of gives room for you to actually reflect on what your goals are, because we are not just an AI tool or just a resume review or something like that. We are actually having you interact with a human who has been a former admissions director and has seen people go through this process, or has gotten in and has now coached people on that process. And so people can then reflect as they're working through that process, hey, is this actually what I want to do? And I think on the career side, we've had a variety of examples where I've had a personal client who originally really wanted to get into consulting. And as I got to know him better, as we kind of discussed what he actually valued in life, he's like, actually, I want to go be a product manager. That's really, and it took that process. And so, had he just gone like, okay, what are all the exact resources that are going to help me get into consulting? Great. Maybe he'd end up there and say, I actually hate this. And it's a longer path to product management. So yes, I think the vast majority are people, that we coach on Leland, will help them actually achieve their stated goal. But I think our process helps to refine that, bring nuance to it, help them reflect on what is my goal long term, and how do I make progress against those things that deeply matter.
Do you think that kind of reflection inspires people to do good almost naturally?
I think so. And especially like the flavor of good they want to do, right? I think we could have a long philosophical conversation about what does it mean? What does good mean? What does it mean to flourish? I'm sure people have different opinions about, what
That's the
good
next
is. And so,
podcast.
yeah, sure, exactly. And I'm sure you could have a dozen on those. And so I think, based on the definition, that might look differently for people. But I do think, when people are able to really reflect and say, no, not just what the superficial mobs are saying is good out there, what really matters. And I think as people do that, they start to say, okay, what is good for my family? What promotes growth and life and upskilling and betterness and harmony and peace for me in my own life and for my family and for my community and for the world, as we take the categorical imperative in the Kantian ethics, like what if we were to expand this across many people, and everybody's doing this, how does the world look in that world? And I think as we really reflect as humans and interact with other people in that reflection and see their views of good and help that to kind of shape our own, I think that can be a really powerful way for us to kind of examine not just what is good, but also what are the goods that you're really excited about. I have friends who are diehard in the nonprofit space, boots on the ground, and it's like, man, I love that. That's a powerful good. And they're more, maybe more excited about certain goods than I am. And I can cheer them on and say, that's amazing, and not feel embarrassed that I'm not as excited about, the good that they are. And then they can cheer me on the goods that I'm really excited about as well. And I think it is interesting to see how sometimes we'll punish each other for saying, well, you're not as excited about this good thing as I am. And so kind of back to your earlier question, as we reflect on those things and admire the goods that we particularly love, and recognize the goods that other people love too, I think we can all be better off for it.
What do you think the key ingredients are that make business a force for good rather than just a vehicle for profit?
Yeah, I am. This will be we'll talk out of both sides of my mouth here, Zach. I still believe businesses should be profit maximizers. So the economist in me and the diehard business, and I recognize there's a lot of problems with capitalism, but I also love capitalism. And so I do think businesses should kind of make it clear that, hey, we a profit maximizer, and incentives matter, and merit matters, and all of those things really matter. And so that maybe that's a conversation for another day too. But I do think for a business, you don't necessarily have to be out there saving the world or whatever. I think Clayton Christensen in How to Measure Your Life really talks about this a lot, about good business done well is good, and I do think a business model should be something that is at least not net negative for society, taken at large. And so I think that is maybe another ingredient that matters, is that something that does promote human flourishing to some degree. And some could argue, well, do certain entertainment models do that, or whatever else? And you can kind of weigh those all against yourself. But I think a business model, I think should matter. But then I think at the end of the day, finding doing business with honesty, with integrity, meritocracies, and treating people as best as you possibly can, and then maximizing the business potential and providing great goods and services for people, and hopefully they're good goods and services for people. But yeah.
As we wrap up, Spencer, looking back at your experience, looking at what you're doing now, what advice would you give to MBA students who are trying to figure out how to improve their application?
Yeah, I would say spend more time thinking about what actually brings your life meaning and fulfillment and flourishing for you. What is the good for you? I think if you really nail that in your own life, your applications are going to be so much better. We spend so much time pursuing what we assume will make us happy and not nearly enough time evaluating what actually brings my life meaning. And I think it's hard work. It's not fun. It's easier to just run with the heuristic that, well, that person's chasing the shiny object, therefore I will too, and I'll be happy because everybody's wanting to do that. But I think if you really want your application to pop, and you don't feel like you've really figured out, man, what drives me? What do I really like? And that doesn't mean you have to have your next, 30 years figured out. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I need my essay and my application to be this perfect story of here's everything that I've done and here's now like everything that I want to go do, and it all fits together so great, doesn't it? No, like I think you want to say, no, deeply raw. Yeah, I've made some mistakes. I was at this company and that was a waste of time. I was at this company, that was a waste of time. But what really matters to me is this, and I think that takes work, that takes effort. And so I would say, really, really put some effort into that, and then be okay with the result. You've got to be okay with, hey, whatever this resonates, what business school this resonates with is the one I want to be at, because it's me, instead of, well, it's the shiny top 5 or top 10 or whatever. And if you go to those, amazing, they are incredible schools, but, think of your life as the gym that you want to go, and what do you want to become? What actually brings you meaning and fulfillment?
Carrying on the gym metaphor, are there any habits that you've adopted that you would recommend to listeners or folks that you coach to get the most out of this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm deeply religious, so I pray and meditate every day, and I go to church every week, and I think sitting through 2 hours of a boring sermon does wonders, forcing yourself to reflect on what is my life. And Arthur Brooks, he was one of my professors at HBS. He came out with a video that talked about the benefits of being bored and how it does really kind of make you start thinking about higher level questions in your life. And so I think, some of the habits that are good is meditation and reflection, setting aside that time. I think we don't like silence, in our current day. We want to be entertained all the time. We want to constantly have something in front of us that we're doing. We want to be busy, but I think really carving out the time, whatever that looks like for people, whether they're religious or not, but set aside that time intentionally. Clayton Christensen did this, for, I think he was like incredibly busy as I think getting his PhD and teaching on the side and raising like 3 kids, and but he intentionally set aside, can't remember if it was an hour a day or an hour a week, but he really set aside that time. And there's other frameworks, like Martin Seligman has a great kind of framework on. He's a kind of the founder of positive psychology, and he's got a great PERMA framework that has been a helpful one for me to think about. As I'm thinking about what does matter to me, what brings me fulfillment. But I do really think that one of the best habits is taking that time to reflect and really examine what's going to drive meaning for my life, and then go do that thing, go pursue that thing, and don't get distracted by the other shiny objects that are around you.
So, Spencer, how can listeners learn more about Leland?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got 200 events from incredible experts every month. And so if you're interested in career development or getting your MBA, we've got GMAT GRE tutors. We partner with ETS and GMAC. We've got great partnerships with them. And obviously, like, GMAC is our favorite. We've partnered on Advancery, and it's a great kind of program to say there's like 50 different steps to go get your MBA. And even before that, you've got to figure out which MBA is going to be good for me. And I think like that Advancery, I think, is a really powerful way to think about which MBA would be a good one. It's great, go apply to Harvard and Stanford, but man, there's hundreds of others out there, and which one might be a really great one for you based on the vision and the meaning that you want to make in the world. And as part of Advancery, we partner where you can get some free coaching on Leland as well. We do have great former admissions directors from great universities who can provide free coaching through that advanced partnership. We have a lot of other resources. JoinLeland.com. You're welcome to go check that out and see what's available there. But come join some of our free events, kind of get to know our coaches and the people there and the resources that we have available to walk through the entire process. And we hope we can be helpful along the journey.
This has been great. Spencer, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Well, you're kind, Zach. It was a pleasure to be here. I hope it's worthwhile, but I really appreciated taking the time. And thanks for all you're doing here.
So for anyone listening who is curious to learn more about Leland or explore what it means to be coached, visit joinleland.com. And to take advantage of some of that free coaching on Leland, you can sign up for GMAT Advancery, your one-stop shop to identify your next career move. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Inside the GMAT wherever you listen to podcasts. Inside the GMAT is brought to you by GMAC. I'm GMAC Zach. And until next time, do good, or else.